Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bite Size. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Kyler Cheatham, and I'm honored to be your host. Bite Size Live, we go live with guests from our international community here at the Confluential every single week. And this week, it is near and dear to my heart as it's someone from not only my own community here internationally that we have in Women in Technology, but actually physically where I live. So this is a first for me that we've been able to have someone from our small rural town here in Colorado and a leader in kind of bridging that gap between the classroom and the actual boardroom. So I'm honored to introduce Dr. Mcgee here today. She will do just a quick introduction, but just to kind of give you some background about her, she's a lecturer here in the business school. We collaborate on a variety of leadership initiatives and an internship coordinator. And she has gotten us some of the top talent from the classroom into actually our team here at the Confluential. So a huge supporter of what we're doing here today. She's also got her doctorate in strategic leadership. So we have lots to learn from her. I think she is really the embodiment, in my opinion, of the modern professor, of really how do we ensure that we're effectively preparing our young talent from making that transition from the classroom to the business. So with that, I will introduce Dr. Mcgee. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share about one of my passions, internships. And thank you for that introduction, man. I feel like I got a lot to live up to here.
Pressure's on. No, totally kidding. But yeah, I think this is going to be a really good conversation and just kind of set the stage for our listeners. A lot of times we'll kind of talk about internships, but I think a lot of these kind of best practices that we'll lay out today can go to really anyone in the workforce, right? Whether you're building out your consultancy, whether you're looking for a new role in technology, we've had a lot of transitions with our bigger tech partners, Microsoft being in the ones that's making headlines this week. So how do you really prepare yourself to go into not only your next role, but also for our young talent to come out of the classroom? So before we kind of dive into that conversation, just want to remind everyone about the logistics. Here, we can see wherever you're dropping your comments from today. We're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. We're live on it. If I don't get to your questions today in this conversation, you always have my commitment. I will go back in. I will tag Professor Mcgee so she can engage in that and some of our colleagues as well for your questions. And then we will ensure that we take kind of your feedback on this conversation into next episodes. So I invite you to join the conversation, share your ideas. That's what kind of makes these conversations cool as we get our community involved as well. And I already see those questions popping in. So kind of just to test that feature, if you could just drop where you're joining us from today, that would be amazing. And we'll kind of go from there. So with that, can you tell us a little bit about your role as an internship coordinator? What does that mean? What does it mean for you to help students kind of get prepped to learn really in the business outside of the classroom?
Absolutely. I think that's good. It'll give us a little bit of a foundation. So, as mentioned, I am an assistant professor of management at Colorado Mesa University right here in Grand Junction, Colorado. So grateful to have Kyler and her family here in Grand Junction as well. And so my primary role is I am a professor in the business department. In addition, one of my roles is that I am the internship coordinator for the Davis School of Business. And so I was thinking through this as I was thinking about today, and I was like, I think my passion really comes from the fact that I came from the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So not a traditional just academic through. I got my master's. I was working in the for-profit and in the business sector and the nonprofit sector, and from that decided that I just really loved teaching. And so then I stepped into more of a formal role and teaching. And because of my past experience of being in the sector, I felt like it was, to me, it's this opportunity to help students. Like, clearly I'm passionate about that collegiate age. How do we help them be successful once they leave college to be able to transition into that business sector, become contributing, helpful, high functioning parts of our businesses? And so internships really can provide that opportunity for that student to step into that role, which is not just good for the student, right? It's really, really good for our businesses.
Absolutely.
And having that ability to make that a smoother transition, I think makes everybody's life a little bit easier. And so that's where I really fell in love with this idea of internships is, really saying, I've been there, I've experienced it. How do I help these students be successful transitioning from classroom to business?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that's so critical to be able to still have that ability to have a professor kind of guide you through that. You have a quote unquote curriculum,
Mhm.
right? And then you also have kind of the business partnering with that. And it reminds me of this partnership that I was just talking about actually with the Mars rover and NASA team, that they partner with academia and industry. And it really creates this kind of triangle of
Mhm.
bringing everyone together to best service. For them it's science and research, but for us it's actually preparing our talent pipeline. And just to give you guys kind of a use case of an idea of this, we hired one of Professor McGree's interns last well, let's see, January she started. And then Avery Kane, I'll embarrass her on our live here, but we'll tag her. She's part of our team now and just won a global industry award for an Gen AI system around software selection. You can actually scan it up here. It's called River AI and see it, and it gives a short list, takes all of our research from the industry, builds it into building an enterprise tech shortlist for people to kind of put in their requirements. Because she was so prepared from what she came through the classroom, she was actually able to put this into practice even before she graduated. And then graduated now, is a rising star in the business at such a young age, and already has won this very, very profound industry award. So that kind of just gives you an idea of how important it is to prepare students for these internships. So, kind of speaking to that, Kristen, how do you source these internships, or how would you recommend businesses structure them so that they can get the most not only out of the student, but also out of getting their talent pipeline kind of moving into that younger talent?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. I would say that that is actually one of the most important parts of an internship is that there's some sort of structure around it, right? I think it's hard to just hire a student and they show up and then it's like, let's see what you do.
Yeah.
There can be some of that, and you have to get to know your student. And some will, they're just like an employee. Some will just take the ball and run with it. Some are going to need a little bit more guidance, right? So there's certainly that. But I thinking that there's some sort of structure is a really helpful piece, both for you and for them. And so Kyler talked a little bit. So we do have a course that the students take at CMU. So in order for them to gain academic credit, they take a course. And that course really is light work, but it creates intentionality and it creates direction and it creates structure. So they have weekly journal entries. And in those journal entries, I ask them to think about something with their internship. So how's the corporate culture? What do you like? What do you dislike? What are some of the characteristics of those you work with that really stand out to you? So really having them take a step back from it and to really think about what am I doing in this? What works? What doesn't work? How do I contribute? What can I do better? So that piece is a nice component. And then, in addition to that, at the very beginning of the semester, they do some work on thinking about objectives, what they want to accomplish, and then what does success look like.
Mhm.
And that is to be shared with their supervisors. So we kind of built that in at the Davis School of Business here at CMU. But if you don't have that, that would be my first piece is start
Mhm.
with an idea of what are some objectives, goals that you and the student want to accomplish. And then what do those look like for success? Like, how do we get to success, right? So it kind of gives them a roadmap. of where they are headed, what success looks like, and make sure you guys are both on the same page. Right. And so I think that's a really powerful piece. And
Mhm,
then I think some sort of a weekly check in is good.
mhm,
And whether that's an in person check in where you sit
mhm,
down with them, whether it's a, hey, I'd like you to write me a journal entry at the end of
mhm,
the week that talks about the culture and what you think of it, right? Something along those lines. And 5 things I learned. So it's something that gives some ability to kind of create the structure, intentionality, and direction on those internships are powerful pieces. And so that's what I would say for that. Again, each person is a little different. You can kind of think about how to work with them through that, but having some is good. The other piece I would just, if I would throw this in there, you guys, these students are eager. The students who want internships, they are hard workers, they are drivers, they are wanting to gain experience. I will tell you my number one challenge my students come to me with is I'm bored. I don't have
yeah,
enough to do.
yeah,
And so think about that in the process too. Like, give them more than you think they can do, because most likely they will meet that and exceed it. And so being intentional about that. And also, that's an opportunity for, I say, have you advocated? Go talk to
mhm,
them, come up with ideas. And
mhm.
you can say that to them, student, please come up with some ideas of different things you could do to contribute. So put that onus on them too, but open that door for that conversation would be powerful.
Absolutely. And that is such a good point, because a lot of times in professional roles, we have to create value for ourselves, especially in, the technology world, where we have a lot of those new emerging technologies in the business space that are creating more efficiencies to quote unquote take jobs. A lot of what, I see when we have those conversations are, well, technology didn't take your job. It wasn't you showing up for the value and being the employee, and figuring out, most importantly, how to explain that. So I'm going to ask you the next question using one of your former students who's actually here at the Confluential, Mick McCurry, which I could do a whole live stream talking about the way that Mick builds value in our organization. He certainly is one of our young rising stars and leaders, and we're very, very grateful. But again, we met him through Professor McGee and her work at CMU. So what are some of the small, often overlooked ways faculty or advisors can build real world readiness into everyday learning? And I love this question because it's not just for the internship coordinators or the directors of internship, it's for our project management professors, it's for our IT professors. What does that look like, and what are your thoughts there?
Oh, such a good question. Mick, it's good to see you. I just want to say that that is something that higher education is really focused on right now.
Mhm,
The research that you will look at will say experiential learning. Experiential learning is the way that students really grasp the concepts. It's said that students have a 20-minute attention span, and you have courses that are like in college, like an hour and 15 minutes, or even in, high schools, more and longer than that, right? So if you have this short attention span, what are we doing to make sure we're really capitalizing on that time that we have in a classroom? And so experiential learning, that is another kind of term that we would probably use for this idea of real world readiness, right? Giving them
mhm,
opportunities to practice those things. So it is a hot topic. It's something in higher ed that we are very intentional on. I know at the Davis School of Business, it's an expectation that we're working on. It's one of our goals that we've set forth to say, how do we create more opportunities for students to experience the learning?
mhm.
And so I see this play out in my class. I'll give you an example of my class. So I'll
Yep.
often talk about a topic, and I will give them the foundation, the knowledge, right? Which is what education is. We are giving them the foundation, that knowledge base, but they have to practice it. I believe they have to
Mhm,
practice it. And a lot of research shows in order for them to grasp it. So I will say, right, okay, so today we're going to learn about persuasive writing. And so we learn tools and tactics about it. I give them examples of real world. We kind of tear it apart, right? Because that's that application. So, yes, I hear you. Let's look at some examples and say how this is good or bad, and then let's practice it. So now you're going to write me a persuasive email asking for a letter of recommendation
Mhm.
um, for a job you want to apply for. Okay, so you can see that we talk about it, we kind of give examples to see good and bad, and then we actually practice it. And so I think that by doing that, that's allowing them that opportunity for it to stick in their brain. So when they're on the job, when they're at an internship and they're like, hey, I need you to write to share about persuasively, we've got an issue with technology, right?
Mhm.
How do we do that and do it well? And we have that foundation for them. So, yes, great question. And I really do think we are trying and understand in higher ed that that's the way to learn, really get our students to grasp it.
Absolutely. And a lot of that kind of persuasive type of strategies come from how do you stand out in the talent pool. A
Mhm.
lot of times, especially right now in our industry, we have a very competitive talent pool. And so I wonder if you have thoughts on how students or graduate degree students or anything like that can really stand out using their resume or certain tools. Do you have any techniques or anything like that that you would share?
Oh man, the amount of resumes and cover letters I have created in my life. If I had a dollar for all those, I'd
I
be a
know.
millionaire, I swear. Um, so yes, I think that there's a lot of when I think about resumes, I always joke. I'm like, you ask 10 different people about a resume, they'll give you 10 different answers, right? So the big piece I would really highlight when we talk about resumes is that your resume is your opportunity to really drive home what makes you different. So if you look at a bullet point on your resume and you can't answer the question of so what, why does it matter? That bullet point either needs to be given some more thought and effort
Mhm,
or it needs to go. Right. And I think so much of the time I'm like, people are like, oh, I have to list everything, but they give me this surface level information and no
mhm,
depth that goes into it.
mhm,
Right. Quantifiable data really help me understand what you did and why it matters. What
mhm,
was the outcome? What's the results? And so that's what I would say when you're looking at those resumes, really think about being able to really identify what sets you apart. And that is being able to expand on your work that you've done. The other piece I would say is that they need to be attractive. They need to look good, right? I said I like pretty docs. I like pretty documents. They should look good. If they are not attractive, somebody's going to toss it. Too hard to read, somebody's going to toss it. You have paragraphs, somebody's going to toss it. Nobody's going to take the time to do that. So, quick bullet points, really bold things so that they can look through it quickly and easily. You don't have to have a one page resume. But if you are going to have more than one page, again, just make sure what you have in there is really valid and it's adding to your ability to do the job you're applying for, right? You don't have to have everything on there, but you do need to highlight the skills you have to be successful in that job. On that note, if I can add a little stat
yeah.
in
Oh yeah,
here.
absolutely.
So, internships, interesting enough, there was a study done, and students who had an internship received 30% more interview
Oh
opportunities
yeah.
and job offers than those who did not. So, again, internships are really playing into people are recognizing the power of an internship and that structure that gives you to be successful transitioning. So yes, powerful. And again, both business and students recognize that side of it.
Yeah, and even, being able to I love your classes because you always reframe that as an opportunity to learn about how you're gonna report in on the business because guess what? That doesn't change, right? That ability to be succinct and clear and impactful in those bullet points. If you join a Fortune 500 company, you know absolutely what I'm talking about bullets that are due every single Friday, about, what happened that week, what did you produce? And it doesn't matter what team you're on, whether you're in back office operations and supply chain or in sales and you actually have to report in on revenue. That's going to be a skill that directly translates from your resume to the overall classroom. And with the rise of things like HR tech and utilizing things for AI searching in those types of resume databases, especially on platforms like LinkedIn, which is a living, breathing portfolio and resume, the biggest search engine in the world, a lot of people see it as, just an opportunity to share a static resume, and that couldn't be farther from the truth of not leveraging a tool that gives you an opportunity to be a living, breathing part of that database, show your search results, and have that opportunity. So I think that, that's such a great way in which you frame that in the classroom of, hey, this is going to be a duty of yours in a business, no matter who you report into, whether it's you did a startup and you're now looking at investors. Talk about the need to report into those shareholders, right? So, and that happens in every industry all the time. So I think it's, great that they're able to exercise and test those skills in the classroom.
I love that. And LinkedIn is absolutely, it's one of the things I teach specifically in one class and I touch on in all my other classes, because it's like students need to understand that this is your living, breathing resume. And there's so much opportunity to really be able to share more through that than a hard piece of paper, right? It still exists. There's some that just want that hard resume, but that LinkedIn is just such a powerful tool for students, and really trying to get them as a sophomore, get them to start using LinkedIn is really my goal, because, they're like, oh, I never look at it. And I'm like, I make them promise once they create their LinkedIn accounts. I'm like, you need to promise me twice a week you go to that instead of Snapchat or TikTok, whatever your choice is. But
Absolutely.
go to LinkedIn. There's so much to gain from that.
Absolutely.
And your brand is so much stronger when you go.
And seeing it as a data point. I mean, in those HR searches, like even for us, our HR consultants, they will search people that have been active on LinkedIn in the last 30 days. So if you haven't, right, you're already out of that employee search. And that piece of it is showcasing, hey, are they up to date on relevant industry conversations? Are they going to be able to have those trending technical conversations with our clients? Those types of different things, whether you're in industry or not, are so critical to at least have a pulse on LinkedIn, as I call it.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go over to one of our questions from YouTube. If you don't follow, we have a Bite Size YouTube channel and the Confidential YouTube channel where you can follow all of our information there. So how has your own career journey shaped the way you show up for your students? And as someone who lectures across the globe at universities, I really think that your process here is very, very unique. As humble as you are, and as you won't take credit for that. You really do believe and bringing the business to show your students. You even have a leadership showcase where you showcase business owners, business leaders in the community that they can kind of talk to. There's lots of things that you do to bring the business into your classroom. So how did your career shape that approach?
Oh, such a good question. So really comes back to this idea of that full experiential learning, right? How do I help students see all the components of it? And I appreciate that, Kyler. One of the ways that I do that is that I do reach out to my community and I pull people into my classroom. I have guest speakers all the time. We'll go do field trips, right? So immersing them, I'm one person. I don't know everything, right? And I have totally different perspectives than some. So I love being able to pull a bunch of people into that classroom or pull my students into that business sector in different ways for them to hear from other people. They may hear something that is totally impactful from somebody else that they wouldn't hear from me, right? And so I really do pull on that external community as much as possible to allow students to get that full education piece to it. I love this. How does it shape the way? So honestly, throughout college, I was really involved in student government and in the leadership office when I was an undergrad student, and I loved it. And I will be honest, a lot of my education came from that. Right. So I know I'm a college professor and I'm saying that out loud, but it's the truth. Like I learned a lot in my classroom. And I used that as foundation to go and use those and practice those skills through student government, through the leadership office. And so I think for me, I saw the impact of how that really enhanced my education. And now I feel like it's my job as an educator to give that to my students as well. I think we could all think of different different skills
Mhm.
that are really hard to gain in a classroom. So I'm passionate about leadership. My master's and my doctorate are in leadership. I teach a leadership class, and it's the hardest class I teach
Mhm.
because leadership is actually really hard to teach.
Absolutely.
You
Oh,
have
yeah.
to practice it, right? I mean, and so it's been a fascinating process. I love the class. It has pushed me in different ways to be creative and thoughtful. Of how do I help these students understand leadership?
Mhm.
Yes, there's the foundation, but then you have to practice, you have to do, you have to be challenged. And so that to me, as much as I can do, they actually have a project they work on that's a leadership project. They have a book they read that's not a textbook, that's about leadership. And they dive into this world of, oh, there's something besides textbooks out there that are
Mhm.
really helpful, right? We talk about teams and that they're on, and we dissect that leadership that's going on within those different teams. And so I think that, being able to give those students those opportunities, because leadership, communications, um, teamwork, those are things you have to practice
Oh,
to get better
absolutely.
at, right?
Yeah.
And the list can go on, right? Internships, opportunities to practice those skills, those are all really powerful in helping cement them.
Absolutely. And I think that's, that part of your approach is teaching students that they are leaders today. I think a lot of times the
Mhm.
word leadership is so misunderstood, especially in our area where we have, certain technology projects that have things like project managers, or they have user groups or data stewards and all of those different levels. And so many times I have people come to me and say, well, the leadership X, the leadership Y. And it's like, okay, well, you can sit here and say, I have zero influence, I have no power, and, be depressed about it. Or you can go out, showcase that value, same way you do on a resume, right? And see yourself as a leader today, because titles do not mean leadership, right? Just because someone has a C in front of their title does not at all mean that they're a powerful leader. Influence is leadership, right? And you learn that when you have no title, right? You have no ability or an authority over the people that are in, your overall colleague pool. And that will happen a lot in the workplace. And I just love that, you show them how to do that today, in a younger journey.
Mhm.
All right, let's get to some of these other questions. These are just like absolutely killer. You guys are absolutely killing it. And if I don't get to all of them, I absolutely will. And then again, for our TikTok audience, I know a lot of you had questions as well, which we're pulling into the YouTube questions. I will answer them, and maybe we'll even get Professor McGee to do a little answer video as well at one point. So let's go in here and say. Oh, this is kind of a good one to pull. And of course, if you see any on the side that you want to answer, you just let me know.
Right.
Where do young professionals tend to underestimate themselves as leaders? And how do you help them see what they're capable of? And maybe I'll add to this, how do you help them explain what they're capable of?
Yeah. Ooh, that is a really good question. So, at the beginning of my leadership class, their very first assignment is to share with me whether they think they're a leader or not. Right. And so, fascinating. My second lesson, as I talk about, okay, let's break this down. We have all led in different ways in different capacities, some very small. Let's identify those small wins, right? I think it's also fascinating the ones that are like, yeah, I lead in everything. I'm a leader. I'm all for it, right? And it's really important to also say, yes, have you thought about servant leadership? Have you thought about
Mhm.
followership? And the
Amen.
importance of being a follower, like being a good leader also requires you to be a good follower, right? And so we talk about that. So I think it's a really fun opportunity. I love that I have an entire semester to really dissect this idea of leadership, because I agree. So many times students are like, I'm not a leader. I've never led anything in my life.
Mhm.
And so we start really small and say, let's talk about something little you've done, right? Have you volunteered? You've led a group there. Have you had to step in on a group project? That's leadership, right? And so really helping them identify that. Also, I think breaking down what they think leadership is, right? One of my favorite sessions is we look at Quiet by Susan Cain,
Oh, I love
and
that book.
the book so good, right? And it's talking about the power of an introvert. And so we have a really good discussion after watching her video, and we talk about, can you be an introvert and be a leader? And so we dissect that, and people are like, "Oh, I can be an introvert and be a leader," right? So
Mhm.
it's really giving them opportunities to explore it, and to recognize like your traits are innate in you, and they're important, and you don't need to change those.
Mhm.
You may, but you also need to capitalize on those and find
Mhm.
those opportunities to really utilize those. Don't think just because you're quiet or you're introverted, or you're maybe lacking a little confidence, that you can't lead. You actually do lead in a lot of
Mhm.
different capacities. And we do talk, Kyler, I love that you said that. The new way of leadership that
Mhm.
we're really exploring right now is influence. It's
Yeah.
influence. And you don't have to have a title. I mean, think about it. How many people that are leaders to you didn't have a title,
Or
right?
don't, you know,
And
at
don't, or don't.
this
Yeah.
very, yeah, and I mean, you think about that in our world. We work on technology implementations that are multi-millions of dollars, sometimes $1 billion with a B, failures, right? And those failures happen from an area in the organization that nobody had any idea that there was a person there that had such influence over an entire department, because they're not a manager, they're not someone, you know, with a title, or they are not, you know, someone that has a director title, but that person had such influence over the perception of new technology and the ability to communicate with their peers, that all of a sudden we have this AI taking my job type of narrative in the organization when we didn't even implement AI,
Mhm.
right? So there's this level of power that can really drop if you don't understand where the areas of influence are in your organization or what your front lines are saying. And that piece of it is being able to figure out how to harness that leadership, right? We're not going in and firing Susan from accounting because she has a great influence. We're going in and asking her because she is a living, breathing data set when it looks to how do we make sure this project is successful going forward. Susan is a leader with a coordinator title, happens all the time. And understanding how that influence works and can create an impact in the business. So important. Love that question. Thank you so much. Let's see. Let's. Oh, this is a good one. Again, from Mick on LinkedIn. How important is it to know your personality type? Is the Hartman personality test something you recommend? Or maybe just personality tests in general, and looking at how do I know at, you know, 20 something years old what type of leader I am, my areas of weakness, my areas of strength. What does that type of data mean to me?
Absolutely. Oh man, powerful. They're just the opportunity to do a personality assessment. Really, there's a variety that are out there. They measure different things. So even doing a couple different ones, right? They're so powerful. And I do it in my classes, and I often tell my students, it's not just powerful in the sense that you understand yourself, right? There's good in that, and there's power in that. This is how I tick. This is what I like. This is how I think, right? All of those are really powerful. It is just as important to understand how others think,
Mhm.
what makes them tick, what will just make them angry, right? What will set them on fire,
Yeah.
right? And I think those are really powerful pieces. So, yes, personality assessments, as many as you get your hands on, absolutely take those, and use it as an opportunity to learn about yourself,
Mhm.
and then capitalize on those strengths, right? And then recognize the weaknesses and work towards improvement towards those. That can be powerful. I would say also make sure, we talk a lot in communications, and when I talk about communications, I'm like, it's not just about you, it's about who you're communicating with, right?
Mhm.
And how do they like to be communicated with? How much detail do they need? Are they direct or indirect communicators?
Mhm.
So the more you can find out about those that you work with, those you have relationships with, the more you can do personality assessments even on that side of it. That gives you this powerful insight on how do you work with this person
Mhm.
well? How do you parent somebody well? How do
Oh,
you be a good spouse? Right? Because we innately have certain traits we're born with. It's who we are, right? And so that you're not going to change that, but you
mhm.
need to figure out how to work through that, right? And so, yes, love personality assessment, do them in all my classes. Very, very powerful opportunity for you to learn about yourself and others.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned quiet because I didn't read quiet until I had an introvert son. I had managed many of introverts in my life, and really, I hadn't honestly given much thought to it. They had kind of always met me where I was, and until I really read that, because I had to parent an introvert child that wasn't like, how do you feel? Tell me all about your feelings. Tell me what's going on. Tell me all of these different things, and that would shut him down, was when I really realized that some of my employees needed to be met with that same level, right? They needed, maybe they didn't want to tell me what they did all weekend, and I was making them wildly uncomfortable because they didn't want any of that. And so a lot of times that's a big piece of continued learning. And if you think that you've learned it all when it comes to leadership, you really need to do some soul searching. That's where we get ego in the C suite and we get problems and a toxic culture because we think we've known everything about leadership, not only about yourself, but also about your team.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
let,
I think that I often say leadership is a journey.
oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
you never get to the point where you're there. It's always learning because you're working with people and people change and need different things and it's complex, right? So, yeah, absolutely. Always growing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I almost wish, we believe in coaching, executive coaching. Here, I would never put someone in a director position without an outside of the organization director, executive coach, because that is really how we continue to work on those skills and effectively service our team and our clients. And that's what we need to be focused on when it comes to how do we reach the next level of technology. As I say, flashy fails, right? Flashy
Mhm.
fails because poor leaders don't understand how to implement and explain that new technology. It creates this chaos in the organization. So,
Mhm.
let's go to this one. I know, we're kind of wrapping up on time here, but I want to make sure that we kind of get to a few more of these questions when it comes to helping students or young professionals succeed, because I think this could easily go to people I hear all the time. Hey, I haven't gotten any interviews in my first year of job searching. How can I make sure that I do that? And so, what are some habits or skills you focus on at Colorado Mesa University to help students succeed in their first year in the job, right? Nobody's grading your homework. No one's making sure that you're doing your work, right? Your mom and dad certainly aren't there checking your grades,
Mhm.
right? So what do you do to set them up for success for that huge? I can't even think, maybe parenting could be an equal life transition, but I can't think of anything else that would be
Yes.
equal to that area of life.
Oh man, it is a big transition. And I honestly think one of the biggest transitions is just your 8 to 5 time frame. That's one of the things that students are like, whoa, even an internship, right? They're used to, I mean, we have great students, they're highly motivated,
Mhm.
right? But they're used to like getting up, going to the gym, hitting a couple of classes, studying in between, maybe hitting the gym again, working till midnight on their homework, right? Their schedule is their own. And so it is an adjustment for them to be like, I have to be here from 8 to 5. And I'm at a desk and I'm working. Right. And so that is definitely a transition. So one of the things I do is I bring in a couple of my recent grad students and have them share some tips, things that they did. Hey, here's some transition or here's some struggles I had as I transitioned. So I think that's good because again, I mean, I graduated a little bit ago,
Yeah.
and so pulling in the expert of those recent graduates has been a successful piece, and that has been one of the things that they're like, it's hard to do that, and my students have said, like get up and go and walk around the block a time or
Mhm.
two, like throughout the day, or stand up and work a little bit. Make sure you take a lunch break, like do things that you can to kind of help that transition be a little bit smoother. So um, I would say just as a business and kind of recognize that that is a big transition for
Mhm.
them and they'll get there. They all say it gets easier, but that
Mhm.
first transition, it is a little bit challenging for them. The other piece I would highly encourage is create good, strong places for people to meet other people at work.
Mhm.
I hear this on internships. I hear this with people who are recently within a job, right? I'm lonely. I feel on the outs. I don't have a community here.
Mhm.
I feel like everybody knows everything and I don't know anything.
Mhm.
And so being really intentional on that onboarding process, or having opportunities that they continue to, either meet with other new employees or meet with employees that are within the organization, get them involved in the culture, right? These students are, they are highly about the community. They
Mhm.
care about the people around them. They want to be involved. They want to be engaged. So give them an opportunity to do that, I think is really, really good. And then for the student side of it, that's where I really advocate ask questions. Ask questions. Don't be afraid. Yes, you're new to this, but people are going to want you to ask questions on the front end to make sure you're doing it right on the back end. So don't be afraid. I hear that again. Internships and new to employment. Well, I just feel like I'm being a pain. I'm asking so many
Mhm.
questions, right? Well, that's part of being a new employee is you have to ask
Mhm.
questions. So ask those questions, make sure you're listening, do your due diligence, try to find stuff on your own side. And if you
Mhm.
can't, then ask the question, right? Hey, I
Mhm.
went and I looked for this and I can't find it. Hey, can you help me? Right. So do manage up, do your work to try to find the answer, but don't be afraid to ask the questions if you can't find the answer. And that again gives people the opportunity to really feel like they understand the full picture. So those would be my
Absolutely.
three pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those, those pieces are really good. I love your approach of, giving yourself some grace. Nobody goes to any transition in life, and you kind of learn that through maturity and wisdom as growing, right? Does everything in life perfectly, right? There are specific life changes, whether, you're moving from, where you went to school to now where you're going to be a young professional. That is a huge change. So really understanding and being communicative with
Mhm.
your manager in that situation of, hey, I'm going through this. And just remember, they're a human. You're a human. The more you treat them like that, the more they're going to understand that relationship. And I love what you said at the beginning of this conversation of how do you create a good internship? Because I think it translates into this as well. What are the objectives that we're working at? And
Mhm.
with a younger employee, those need to be so clear, and there needs to be check ins, in my humble opinion, on a weekly basis. What are we doing this week? What did we accomplish this week? And many times they don't even know the impact that they have on the business.
Mhm.
That is the leader's job to show them, hey, you created this. This is how it went from you to actually making a positive impact on the organization, whether it was revenue, new tool, just the client experience in general. And that is so, so critical.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it is. That is a really important piece for them is just to know what they need to be working towards. You have to remember these students are coming from using rubrics, right? And when I first started, I was like, I'm not using a rubric. There's no rubrics in the business world. Like, what are we doing? I recognize that giving them some guidance and ideas of what success looks for is important. And that comes in higher ed and in education in general with a rubric, right? This is what this should look like. I know that's not in the business world, but if you can give them this is what we're trying to accomplish, it's the idea of what they've worked from. This is their rubric, right? So what are we trying to accomplish? Oh, I get this. I can do that, right? And that will help with that transition too. But critical to help to give them a little bit of guidance. And again, they'll grow into it. You just got to help them give them some
Absolutely.
foundation to grow from.
Yeah. And having, that I call it, a database of having understanding the impact you're making on the business is then going to translate to things like performance reviews. And we've had this conversation, I feel like I'm blue in the face this week from talking about it, but we have, new AI tools that look at performance data within the organization. Ideally, they're not looking at the performance of the employee, they're looking at things like performance of the machinery, predictive maintenance, but they do look at data points for the machinery. And that I just had a video blow up on TikTok where I talked about how a digital twin is actually a huge snitch because they will if the machine will tell on you if you take 5 minutes longer in your coffee break. And we can get leaders, right, that I counsel that get obsessed with those weird metrics. It does not matter, if Susan from accounting took 5 minutes more in her coffee break. Maybe she was tired and she's a human being and she needed a break, but she's accomplished all of these other things because she had a great professor like Dr. McGee that showed her how to be able to document all of these things. Because if you think a rubric is hard, try a performance review where you have to do your self-evaluation. That takes months to put together in a larger, more sophisticated organization. The ones that are getting promoted are when they have that glowing performance review because they said, even though I took a 5 minute longer coffee break, I and this machine I'm utilizing and this AI tool I'm utilizing led the supply chain to have 12% more efficiency and 50% less overhead in waste, right? Then no one cares if Susan took a 5 minute longer coffee break because of that impact they had on the organization.
I
So,
love that. And a
yeah.
very important approach to have with these students because I'm telling you, they will work hard, give them tasks, they will exceed what you think they can do. So they will work hard, invest in them, care about them.
Mm-hmm.
Those things matter to this generation so much. They will work so hard for you if they feel like you care about them and that they're
Yeah.
part of something greater. Right. And so creating that community for them, I think is really important. You guys have done a fantastic job of that.
Thank you.
Yes, my 3 students who intern/work with you,
Uh-huh.
they cannot speak more highly
Oh,
about
thank
the
you.
organization and about the leadership, right? Because you guys have taken that time to really invest in them, talk to them, include them, make them feel like they matter, like those things, and they'll rise to the challenge, right? I mean,
Oh,
it's
always.
just they're
Um,
fantastic. We have a great group of young employees, just a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. And you just got to figure out how to connect with them, and they'll move mountains for you.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. This generation a lot of times gets a bad rap, but I think that comes from, and you guys know me, I'm a straight shooter when it comes to this types of stuff. It comes from lazy leadership because you didn't take the time to get to know their motivations.
Mhm.
And now you can't figure out why your $100 million AI project failed because you have a Gen Z workforce. It has zero to do with Gen Z. It has everything to do with you not effectively assessing and recognizing your executive bubble, right? When you are an executive in an organization, a leader, you have zero idea what the culture is because you live in this bubble.
Mhm.
And until you assess that, take the time to listen more than you talk, then you're going to be in an abundance environment to be technology savvy, right? But only if you take the time to get to know that level of your team. So,
Yes.
such an important conversation. Well, this has been, I mean, amazing. We could obviously, go for hours doing this, but I think, it's so critical as we develop the younger talent tier to really understand that relationship between how do we show up as a business community to be partners to our young talent, and how do we learn from people like you, yet you have dedicated your entire career to really harvesting and creating a platform in which they can be successful. So thank you for spending your time and teaching us about how we can best meet these students or these younger professionals where they are, leverage their talent and motivation, and be successful in the workforce. Any closing thoughts that you want to share and wrap up the conversation before we kind of close out today?
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity again. I love talking about internships. I'm super passionate about it. I think when you really look at the outcome, the impact you're having on these students and on these businesses, I can't encourage you enough. Leap, go for it, try it out, create some structure, and then build your internship program from there. So don't be afraid just because you're like, I don't know where to start.
Mhm.
Start with some goals and objectives, right? Outline that for your student, and then guide them along the way. Check in with them. They can be actually a project I have one of my companies working on right now, is they actually are creating the intern is creating an internship guide,
I
right?
love
So,
that. Yeah.
right,
Mhm.
like there's so much good that can come from this, for you and for these young professionals. They are eager, they want to learn, and I just can't encourage you enough. Take the leap, reach out to me. I would be happy to help along the way. If you're stepping into this, you're new to it, I'd be happy to share with you what we do here at Colorado Mesa University, and then just some of my own personal thoughts too. So Thank you for
And
the
I love
time and
that. Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so critical. I mean, when we did our internship programs, we consulted with Dr. McGee to say, like, what in the world, like, how do we ensure that this makes sense? Because we are such, a technical organization. We're not expecting you to come out and know everything about SAP S4 HANA. That would be straight crazy, right? So how can we bridge that gap? And a lot of times she helps us know things that we forget to ask. For example, Mick can speak to this. He's one of our international consultants. I forgot to ask him if he has a passport or not, because everyone I work with, right, has a passport. I haven't, engaged with someone that young in, 10 years, because I'm used to, having a team of directors that easily have their passport. I have to, remind them what we do as far as travel, things that I haven't been involved in, but consulting with how do I make this clear with people that is their profession is so critical, and I think an untapped resource. The more, you guys know me, the more we bring in our academia colleagues, whether we're using them for their research and organizational consulting, whether we're using them for their project management methodologies, or like the NASA team, they're using them to be able to build more durable technology. I truly think that is one area of our industry that we absolutely can leverage our colleagues to figure out how to build outstanding teams. And that's one piece that we haven't really tapped into, at least that I've seen yet. So be curious to hear from you in the comments, whether you're watching this on replay or you're engaging in all the questions. It really is your insight that makes these conversations valuable. So thank you to Dr. McGee. Thank you to the audience. And we will see you on Bite Size next week.